Hello, good noon everyone, and welcome to my talk about business parameters. If you haven't read the little abstract, you'll probably wonder what it is about. Well, that's what I'm going to explain to you. So this is a brand new open source project. So I'll first give a small intro about that. Then I'll explain what the use case is that we'll try to resolve with this project. I'll tell you where we want to go with it, where we currently are, and then if I have some time left, I will attempt to give a small demo. So, we're an open source project. We're actually brand new. We're that brand new that we don't even have a website yet. But we do have GitHub, so there you can find all our source code. And we have an email address. So if what you see here interests you, or you have feedback, or you want to follow us, send us an email to that email address. And if you want to give feedback on Twitter, you have my Twitter handle below, and you can use the hashtag #bparameters. Okay. So, what are we trying to do? I'll give a short an example of the thing that you can do with our project in the form of a pet shop store sale. No, not a pet shop store, just not a meta pet shop, a real pet shop that has a sales period. So if you, for example, your shop wants to do something like this, we have sales, we give 10% off on everything. Then you need to tell to your web application that you're in a period of sales. So that is some little item of configuration, and typically you put that in a properties file. So somewhere in your application you will have a properties file where you have all your database configuration and stuff, and which has a switch that says our sales are currently active, true or false. This is not really very handy, because if you want to start or stop your sales, it will have to be adapted by the system operator, and depending on the server you're on, that might not be picked up automatically, but you might need to restart your server. So that's not really nice well, with all the dynamic stuff going on today. And then, of course, you might want to do something more than just have sales or no sales. You might, for example, need to say, okay, in July we give 10% off, and then in August we make it 20%. If you want to do that in a properties file, okay, you would have to put your percentage as a property, at least. And you might think, okay, I'm going to try and be smart. I'll put multiple properties and encode the month in it. So I can encode my percentage as a function of the month. So these properties files, if you mangle the names of the properties, you could automate that a little bit. Of course, we all know if you try to outsmart the marketing department, they will come up with some incompatible requirements. Like, if you want to have sales during the Christmas holiday, that doesn't fit well into the number of your month. And let's say that during that period, we also give 30% off for goldfish, because they won't survive the winter anyway. So that becomes even more complex. So if you want to have that in a properties file, you could do something like that. But as your requirements evolve, that can become quite complex, difficult to manage, and you'll have problems. What you really want is this: a table. It actually seems quite simple. This is a table where you encode what you want to represent. It seems very simple, but to do that you will have to develop a database schema to represent this, and you want your business users to manage that. So you will also have to implement some kind of user interface. So that are kind of the problems that we see today in this kind of configuration. So all of these things that are really not part of your core business, that are not in your core domain, but that you need anyway to configure in your application. And that is what we are trying to resolve in this project. So we want to be a generic framework where you can have a more declarative definition of your configuration parameters. So for example, here what we're trying to do is we want to map some range of dates, possibly including a species of animal, and we want to map that to an integer. In this case, the percentage of discount. There are other use cases, so this was kind of business-related configuration. You can use it to represent master data. You can store user preferences in it. Nowadays, with continuous delivery, you need to have feature toggles to switch functionality on and off if it's not yet ready for production. You can put that in it too. A/B testing. You can do lots of things with just this concept. So what we want in the end with this open source project, I'll show you a slide of what we're currently envisioning as an architecture for this. So you would have an application, your application, which will use a Java client or possibly another client to communicate with our business parameters backend. And aside from that, there will be a web application that is used by your business users to manage the values of this configuration. And into that system, you will plug your definitions of your parameters, of your configuration. So that's where we want to go. And one important thing in this project is that we want it to be extensible. So we want it so that you can enter in this system your own data types, that you can use your protocol to interact with it, and that you can use your backing storage to make it easier and not to require you to install other servers or database servers that may not already be in your infrastructure. So the goal is for the most standard technologies to provide this out of the box, and we also want to make it possible to write your own extensions. Of course, that is all in the future. So here, just as an introduction, I've noted down the basic types of group that we currently want to support. So you have mapped parameters, which are basically just a map. So here we see a mapping of a capital of a country. Another type is ranged parameters. So you give a range of values, and if you request the parameter value for a certain value, so if we want to find the kind of school at age 4, then we will find there the kindergarten. And then a third type is just simple parameters. You will have one parameter which can have one value. And the strength in this approach is that you can combine these, which is actually, if we go back to our pet shop, which is what we see there, because we first want to use the date range to see where are we today. So what sales period are we in today? And then we might add for what kind of animal are we trying to find the discount percentage. And if we give those two values, then we will find the percentage to apply to the sale, to the order. So what you see here in code is kind of the definition of this group. So we have a ranged group that is the parameter period of type local date, which maps to a mapped group that has a parameter species. And those two will map to the actual percentage. So this is kind of a fluent API. It may not be too readable. We also want to make it possible to specify that, for example, in XML. I know it's not popular anymore, but we want it to be able to be specified in anything, because it's business parameters. So you might want to use Excel, because business people are mostly confident in Excel, so they might want to specify it in that. So and then that's for the definition part. Then you want to use that in your application. For that, we also envision some kind of fluent API that you can just use in your Java code and say, we want to have sales for today for goldfish, and we want to get a percentage. Then you get a value, and then you can use that to do whatever calculation you want. So that's what we are envisioning. Where are we currently? I'm afraid that's a bit less than what I showed you. So given the architecture, we basically currently have a very basic implementation. So we only support very basic data types. In our backend, we are currently using an Elasticsearch database, and the communication between the application and the web application is in REST. Oh yeah, and to use it in Java, the current API is very clunky, so we want to replace that with this fluent API in the end. So that is our current focus. So to have this fluent API. We're also investigating the deployment, how we will deploy this. It might be very useful to have that just as a Docker image, so you don't need to set up any servers or stuff. And documentation, of course, because if you're going to use it, you'll need to know how. So that's one of the things we really need to get starting on, to have that more clear, so that you can go and try it out. So I have basically 2 minutes left for a demo, which isn't really much, but we'll see what it gives. So I need to go to my pet shop. So actually, I've made a server that basically starts up my pet shop and my parameters stuff. Whoa, this screen is really more small than I imagined. So I need to reduce that. Okay, so this is the pet shop that we saw some screenshots of earlier. So if I have one cat, I pay 80 euros. If I have 2 cats, I pay 160. But I don't actually have any parameters currently defined. So if I go to my parameters application, it will be empty. So I need to change some code for that. I'll just kill it. And I'm getting out of time here, so I probably won't be able to show you. So that's why I have this panic code, which will allow me to paste it in if it wants to open my class, my actual class. It doesn't want to open my class. I'm not sure what's going wrong. Something's going wrong. So that's this one, it does want to open, this one it doesn't. So I'll try with this, but my time is up, so sorry I can't show you right now, which is a bit of a pity, but I hope you get the concept. If you're interested to follow this, we actually, you can find it there on GitHub. We have an email address, which you find there, and my Twitter handle, and I'm afraid I have no time for questions. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to see you again next year, where I may have a bit more time in a 1 hour slot to show you some real stuff. Thank you.